So the stream should be starting up now. Cool. I'm going to go away. Jeff, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this most informative workshop. And my name is Jeffrey Maisel. I am the legal advisor to the President's Co-op and Condo Council, and in my spare time, I'm an attorney with the law firm of Hank and Maisel, and we represent co-op and condo boards. As many of you are well aware, when the COVID pandemic hit, the United States Congress passed the CARES Act, which included the Paycheck Protection Program, and this was in March and April of 2020. Unfortunately, when some of the interim rulings came down, co-ops were effectively shut out or carved out of the Paycheck Protection Program. These are forgivable loans that many of your co-ops are applying for as we speak, and the purpose of today's seminar is to answer any questions and to fill in some of the blanks with respect to this effort. I just want to say that when the President's Co-op and Condo Council realized that co-ops were cut out, we immediately called our go-to elected official, Congresswoman Meng. And I actually looked at the timeline today. From the time we first spoke to you to the time it was in the HEROES Act was about 5 weeks. So it was just an incredible, Congressman, you rallied the New York delegation of congressional members and motivated the Speaker's office, and we just appreciate everything you did on that. And as a result of your efforts, many co-ops today are now eligible for these loans and making applications as we speak. So on behalf of the 100,000 residents represented by the President's Co-op and Condo Council, we thank you. And I turn the floor over to you at this point.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for those kind words. 5 weeks is actually kind of quick in congressional life. So I appreciate your words of thanks, but I also want to emphasize how crucial the everyday working families of Queens have been to the recovery and to legislation such as this passed in response to the coronavirus pandemic, because as you all know, families here in Queens were amongst the hardest and first hit, not just in New York, but across the country. So literally on issues like this, we really depended on hearing from everyday working families in the best borough, right, Tom? And folks throughout New York to help us to most accurately address the issues, because a lot of them at the time weren't necessarily faced by Americans in other parts of the country yet. So, I want to say a big thank you to so many of you who are on the call today and literally helped make that happen. Good evening, everyone. I am Congresswoman Grace Meng from Queens, New York. I represent parts of Queens in Washington, D.C. And I want to welcome all of you to tonight's Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, as we all now know, for managers of housing cooperatives. Thank you again to Jeff for your kind introduction and for your leadership on this issue. I want to especially recognize some SBA leaders who really have been working day in and day out, working so hard during, it's about a year now, right? Beth and John and Matthew of the SBA, thank you so much for your participation. I believe Man Lee is on as well. She does a lot of work in many of our underserved communities. So thank you, Man Lee. Again, thank you to Jeff, to Bob Friedrich, and to Warren Schreiber, and to all the members for their support and leadership to help housing co-ops become eligible for PPP. This might not have happened without your advocacy. You've been such champions and such friends, and I really want to thank you. We were able to get it done so quickly because of your leadership. Of course, always thank you to Tom Gretsch, who has been such a champion on so many issues. Tom has literally been everywhere throughout this pandemic and the quarantine period. There are a lot of people I haven't seen too often, but I think Tom is amongst one of the top people that I get to see out and about, because he's always working on behalf of Queens businesses and Queens families. So thank you so much for your compassionate leadership. Last year, as you all know, everyone on this call knows, was incredibly hard for our community. Almost a year ago at this point, we were the epicenter of the epicenter. And I know that folks in Queens and New York continue to struggle because of COVID-19. I want to make sure that our community gets the help that it needs. Last year, as Jeff mentioned, Congress created the Paycheck Protection Program to help small businesses affected by COVID-19 to keep their employees on payroll. And while it was paved with good intentions, at first, it did not include housing co-ops, which, as you all know, have also struggled to continue to pay for services, whether it be repairs and maintenance, office staff during this health crisis. Co-ops, as you all know, are a critical part of Queens, serving as homes for thousands of hardworking middle-class residents throughout our borough. If you drive around my congressional district, whether it's Bayside to Flushing, Forest Hills, Regal Park, etc., you will see plenty of co-ops. And as you all know, COVID has placed an unprecedented strain on co-ops in Queens and New York, the same way that the virus has negatively affected countless other business entities and entrepreneurs. And I was glad to hear directly from you throughout the entire, probably last year, about the economic strain and the need that people faced. And that's why I fought on numerous fronts to change the law and to make sure that our co-ops were included in the PPP program. And whether it was calling on the former administration many times to make co-ops eligible, or working with our House Small Business Committee, and our chairwoman is Nydia Velasquez right here from New York, and our entire New York City delegation, or even coordinating with our national co-op allies, I'm glad that we got it done so that you could participate in PPPs. Making co-ops finally eligible for PPP under the December $1 billion coronavirus relief package was a real testament to your persistence and our partnership. I'm really glad that we're here tonight to be able to talk about how you can access the much needed funds. Tonight, we're real lucky to hear from our distinguished panel to help answer some of our questions. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman. At this point, I want to introduce Tom Gretsch. Those of us in the co-op world are very familiar with Tom. He's been a great friend to our community. He even comes to our meetings and sits and listens to us gripe about all the problems co-ops have in the world. But the Queens Chamber of Commerce has been a real advocate for co-ops and was right there with us on these issues all the way. So Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and great to see these panels here. Just wonderful. My hat is off to Congresswoman Grace Meng. She's been with us every step of the way from the first challenges that we had back in April, led by the Queens delegation, Greg Meeks, Tom Swazi. Congresswoman Meng was always there for us every step of the way. In fact, I was able to convince her to join me in a partnership with Peter King from across the aisle in a bipartisan way. It's really kind of funny. Pete King recently retired after, I think it was 27, 28 years in Congress. And I thought, who better than to have the last roar of the Republican lion partner with Grace Meng, our up and coming Congresswoman from Queens, in a truly bipartisan way. I don't care whether you're from a red state or from a blue state, or a way of thinking. At the end of the day, our restaurants throughout the area are hurting and hurting badly. And to their credit, both Congresswoman Ming and Congressman King came together in a unified bipartisan way to help fight for aid for our restaurants. And it was quite an accomplishment of theirs to meet us at Bourbon Street and Bayside with a ton of press and other elected leaders making the case for this aid package. And so a few stats. Queens County is the home to 6,000 restaurants. I confidently but sadly tell you that up to 1,000 of those have closed, probably for good. We estimate that another 2,000 are on the brink. The governor announced today a little bit of a speed up of openings from the 14th for Valentine's Day to the 12th. We're still stuck with a 10 p.m. curfew. We're still stuck with 25%. The chamber's been advocating strongly, nonstop, for 50% by March 1st and 100% by St. Patrick's Day. Whether you're Irish or not, no matter what your persuasion is in Queens County, if we lose another St. Patrick's Day, which are generally make or break for many different restaurants, again, whether you're Irish or not, the treble effect of those places is huge to our industry and to our borough. We're strongly advocating for that. I know there was a PowerPoint put up regarding some of the things the Queen's Chamber does. Just broadly speaking, we've been around since 1911. We're in 110th year. And since then, we've advocated, we've networked, and we've educated our membership. Next slide. There you go. Thanks so much. So that's the one you can stay at right now. Thanks, Max. Today, we have over 1,300 members representing 120,000 Queens-based employees. We didn't miss a beat with the COVID. We went all virtual starting on March 16th, 2020, and we still act that way. We had well over 320 events. I probably should buy stock in Zoom if I haven't already, because we use Zoom 5, 6, 8 hours a day across the board. All of our different organizational efforts utilize Zoom. We have been working really hard at trying to get every facet of our community up and running, from the small mom and pop restaurants, bodegas, and retailers, up to and including our airports. JFK and LaGuardia are home to over 100 domestic and international airlines, employing over 50,000 people. We have the most dense aviation hub in the US, and they're hurting. Healthcare and transportation are basically tied with employment in Queens County. And we also are home to 8 colleges and universities with 90,000 students. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have never been more diverse. I love being asked about being part of these things. I love what I do. I hope it shows. It's a really, really important time. I also been involved in a whole bunch of different projects. If anybody wants to see this slide deck afterwards, I'd much rather talk to it. And I'd much rather talk to you folks than talk to it. Next slide, please. We partner with all the other chambers of commerce. I can tell you, right after the COVID hit, we had a weekly phone call with all of the local chambers of commerce, the BIDs, the LDCs, and merchant associations throughout Queens County to listen to them, to advocate for them, and help them get through the process of getting aid. Next slide, please. Currently, we're involved in a whole number of different things. It's important for folks to know we are a member organization and we value our members and those that pay the membership fees. But I will tell you also, we opened up our world to members and non-members alike. I made that decision with the support of my board. We had to help people, and we're happy to do it across the board. Next slide. That's just an overall thank you for everybody in Queens County that supported us. And you can close the slide deck now. I want to speak to a couple of other different things, if you don't mind. Again, the support of our elected officials, city, state, and federal, but my hat is truly off to Congresswoman Meng. And I also want to do a shout out and a thanks to our friends at SBA. We had the occasion to host Beth Goldberg. I consider the friends and the hardworking appointees and employees of SBA our partners. We work all the time with Manly Lynn. She's been a fantastic ad, and they don't usually tout their horn too much, so I will tout it for them. In the height of this pandemic, the folks at the SBA processed more applications in 14 days than they had in the previous 14 years. We all owe a debt of gratitude to these public servants for what they did. My hat is off to each and every one of them. We don't fancy ourselves as bashers at the Queens Chamber of Commerce. We believe in working together and that a rising tide lifts all boats. I will tell you that the process for Triple P aid has been a remarkable one. We lobbied strongly, not only for organizations such as ours, which is a 501c6, but for the co-ops and condos. When Jeff and his group came to me and said, Tom, we need your help, there was only one person to go. That was Grace Meng. We're happy to support these people and other not-for-profits that are out there for the aid as well. You know, these condos and co-ops are little businesses themselves. Their buying power in a place like Queens County is tremendous, whether they're buying windows or doors or HVAC services. No matter what it is, we support those that drive Queens County. And it's been a privilege to work with you guys, Jeff, and your members. And we look to be able to help your entire organizations down the road, whether it's for procurement reasons, some of the energy things that are on the horizons, even to help you guys process the Triple P loans. We're here to help. And again, we have a debt of gratitude to all of you folks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tom. Once again, thank you for your leadership and thank you for working so hard, your board, your team, your volunteers, every single day you've been out there, and we really appreciate it here in Queens, and we know we have lots more to do. It's my honor now to introduce two of our special guests from the Small Business Administration. Beth Goldberg is our district director of our New York office of the SBA. She oversees the delivery and efficiency of SBA's programs and services to about 1.6 million small businesses, employing 5 million people with an annual payroll of $330 billion. This is the largest of all SBA's 68 geographically distributed district offices across the country. I'm also proud to introduce SBA New York Deputy Director, John Milano. He oversees delivery of SBA programs and services for the district office that serves Metro New York, including the SBA's financing programs, counseling, training, contracting, certification, and disaster assistance. And before I turn the floor over to them, I just wanted to make a quick footnote. I just want to remind everyone, a few years ago, we were able to secure funding to open a small business development center in Queens. It is done with the concerns of my constituents in my congressional district. I was just jealous that other congressional districts had one and we didn't. So it's literally open right across the street from Queens College, near the Horace Harding Expressway on Casina. It is a free service. There are multiple languages spoken there. So even though it's not directly related to our topic here today, if you know anyone, entrepreneur to longtime small business owner, please, we can get them the contact information. We want Queens folks to take advantage of that. On that note, thank you to our SBA guests. Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Congresswoman Meng. First of all, thank you for having us here. And this is really a great forum to get as much information as possible to small businesses. And it's really great to be able to come here today and help all your constituents. Max, would you put up the PowerPoint, please? Next slide, please. So this is the topics we're going to cover really quickly today: who we are, SBA's COVID-19 economic aid funding options. We're going to discuss a little bit about the PPP and the EIDL loan program. Two grant programs that are out there: the Targeted EIDL Advance, the SVOG, or better known as the Shuttered Venues Grant, and also some additional assistance and resources that all small businesses have. Next slide. So Congress intended this round of COVID economic aid funding to support the hardest hit small businesses and those in underserved segments, including women, minorities, and veterans. The SBA, of course, is committed to ensuring these programs are launched as quickly as possible to deliver critical economic aid to American small businesses and other eligible entities. Next slide, please. So these are the major programs from the economic aid funding options that you have. Our flagship program, the Paycheck Protection Program. Another program that little people know that is really extremely helpful for small businesses is the Debt Relief Program on current SBA 7A, 504, and microloan programs. Our EIDL program, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and also the one that we don't have much information, that we're still waiting for more information on, the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant. Next slide, please. So these are the top takeaways of the new Paycheck Protection Program. It expanded eligibilities and how funds can be used. Now borrowers can use programs over either an 8 or 24-week period. It offers a second draw PPP loan option for the hardest hit small businesses. Really, really important. So people who got the first PPP now have an option to get a second draw PPP. Allows for deductions and expenses covered with forgiven PPP loan debt on federal taxes. This is also a huge, huge benefit. What it does is it allows you to deduct the expenses that are being reimbursed to you by the loan. So you're almost getting a double benefit here. You're getting the loan, you're possibly getting it all forgiven, and then you're having the ability to deduct those expenses from your federal taxes. Is truly, truly a big benefit. There's also an update on the simplification of the forgiveness of up to $150,000. So if you have a loan of less than a PPP loan less than $150,000, you can now self-certify. You still have to use the funds the way they're intended to be, but you can now self-certify that you've used those funds correctly, and you will get forgiveness. Also, another big advantage is with the EIDL Advance, the amount of up to $10,000, which was initially given on the EIDL Advance, was deducted from your PPP loan. Well, that's no longer true now. So now you get full forgiveness of not only the advance, but also the full PPP loan amount. Next slide, please. So what is a first draw PPP? So PPP loan eligibility now includes additional types of entities. Covered eligible expenses have been expanded. You can now set a covered period of anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks after disbursements. Certain borrowers can now get an increase to the original PPP loan. So if you had a first PPP loan and the calculation was incorrect, you didn't have the ability to go back and get that additional funds. The way it is now, if your first PPP was calculated incorrectly, you can now go back in and get an increase on that first PPP loan amount. Businesses must have been in business by February 15th, and you have to apply for PPP by March 31st, 2021, or until congressional appropriations are exhausted. Next slide, please. So these are the expanded eligibility for the first draw PPP. You see housing co-ops there, certain marketing organizations, also 501c6s. These are chambers of commerce and business organizations that were left out on the first time are eligible this time. eligible news organizations. And businesses that were eligible previously on a first draw PPP are still eligible now. Next slide, please. So like I said, now they have the option for businesses who used a first draw PP, what is now called a second draw PPP. There are some qualifications to be eligible for a second draw PPP. They lowered the amount of employees a business have. So normally it would be 500 or fewer employees. For a second draw PPP, you have to have less than 300 employees. And you also have to have suffered at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts, either annually from 19 to 20, or you can compare quarter to quarter. So if there's if you show one quarter from 19 compared to a quarter in 2020, where there was a 25% reduction in gross receipts, this makes you eligible for a second draw PPP. Food services, the ones that were hurt really hard, can now get up to 3.5 times their monthly payroll average for a second draw PPP. Normally, your monthly average would have been 2.5 times your average monthly salary. Second draw PPPs use Form 2483 SD, but 90% of the banks out there are not accepting paper application. They all have lender portals where you would probably submit your application electronically through the bank's lender portal. Next slide, please. So, like I said, there's some, you must, first of all, in order to be eligible for a second draw PPP, you must have used all the funds on your first draw PPP. Less than 300 employees, and a 25% reduction in gross receipts. Next slide, please. So this is the process on how to apply for a PPP loan. You would find a PPP lender. The best lender to go to would be the bank that you normally do business with. They know you the best. That's your best chances and the quickest way to get your funds. If you'd like to find a participating PPP lender, you can go to sba.gov/lender match. There you can put in your zip code and it will find you a participating PPP lender. From there, you would complete an application with your lender. You do not send the application to SBA. All you do is you fill out the application on the lender's portal. The SBA, once you get approved, the SBA will issue an SBA loan number to the lender. The lender will share that number with you. That's the application process for a PPP. Next slide, please. So what happens if you have taken a PPP loan and it's not 100% forgiven? The loan becomes a 1% loan. There's still no requirement for collateral or personal guarantees. There's no fees or prepayment penalties. And the maturity on that loan would be 5 years. The loan payments would start once you've calculated your PPP loan application that you would not be totally forgiven. You could then start making payments to your borrower. Or the latest that you can start making payments to your borrower, it would be 10 months after the end of the chosen covered period, either the 8-week or 24-week period. 10 months after that period, your covered period is ended, that's when you'd start making payments on your PPP loan if it was not 100% forgiveness. Now, another thing I'd like to bring here is this is not an all or nothing. If you can get partial forgiveness, so if you use a portion of the money the way you're supposed to use it, that amount will be forgiven. Only the unforgiven portion is the amount that goes into a loan. Next slide, please. Borrower must apply for PPP loan forgiveness. They do that through their lender. After you've used your funds during your 8-week or 24-week period, you then have 10 months to submit a forgiveness application to your lender, and they will make a decision on your forgiveness of your PPP loan. Also, there is a new simplified forgiveness application for loans under $150,000, like I mentioned earlier. You would just self-certify that you've used the funds correctly, and you can get forgiveness on that loan. Next slide, please. So this is the program I told you that a lot of people don't realize, and it's really an important program. This is the SBA-backed loan debt relief program. So SBA will make all your 7A, 504, and microloan payments for the next 6 months. So you do not have to make payments on any of these SBA loans. Now there's a couple of things that you have to do to be eligible for it. You must be current on your loan, very important. The other thing too is a lot of times borrowers go to their lenders and put their loans, even though they're current, they put them in a deferment status. If your loan is in a deferment status, the SBA will not make those payments. You have to go to your lender and take it out of deferment in order for the SBA to make payments on those loans. Next slide, please. So Beth Goldberg will take it over from here and discuss the economic injury disaster loan.
Thanks, John. Before we move on, I just want to add a couple of things to what John said, which are really tips for you if you're applying. One is, although the banks are not accepting paper applications, I strongly suggest that you print out one and go over that paper application and make sure that all that you have and understand all that information before you start inputting online in the bank's application. The other thing is on that self-certification form, even though you're self-certifying, that you need to keep your books and records for 4 years. At any time, you could be audited on that self-certification. So, don't throw it in a garbage bag and say, hey, I'm never going to see that again. And then on the 504 loan, there's 2 parts to it. It's the SBA part and the part that is with another bank, another lender. The deferment on that is only on the SBA portion of the loan, not on the private lender part of that piece. So with that as the, I don't see the PowerPoint. Is the PowerPoint still up? Yes. I don't know what happened. It disappeared. Okay. Yeah, I don't see it anymore, but you know what? I have plan B. I have the backup next to me. So let's see. Okay, so on the EIDL loan, it was extended by Congress. Am I gone?
You're there.
I'm here. I don't know what's going on. Okay, now I see everything. Well, no, I think this is yours. Okay, now I see everything. Thank you. This was extended. It was due to expire on December 31st, 2020. Now it extends to the end of 2021. This is a working capital loan for expenses such as healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, fixed debt payments. You should think of this, if you need more help than the PPP, as an extension of another loan source. And, you can't double dip, but you need to do a sources and uses statement. And for whatever you use the PPP loan for, you then can use the other, your other needs. You can apply for an EIDL loan. For businesses, it's 3.75% for 30 years. And for not-for-profits, it's 2.75% also for 30 years. There's no prepayment penalty, and they will look to secure the loan for anything over $25,000. So we use the example of a $20,000 loan over 30 years. For a business, that would be $92 a month. For a not-for-profit, it would be $82 a month, to give you a point of reference. Small businesses, cooperatives, and agricultural enterprises with 500 or fewer employees are eligible to apply for this loan. So not only a cooperative board that's a business, running those buildings, but for example, if you have a tenant in a co-op and they own a unit, a dentist, an accountant, a lawyer, a shoe store, a restaurant, they can also apply for the business co-op. The commercial co-op can also apply for an EIDL loan. Next slide, please. The targeted EIDL advance, at the beginning of the disaster, the advance ran out of money and Congress has refunded it with some new qualifications. If you received some part of an EIDL advance between $1,000 and $10,000 prior, and you are in a low-income community yet to be defined, the maps have not been put up, and suffered greater than a 30% loss and have fewer than 300 employees, you will be contacted by SBA directly to apply for the rest or the balance of that money up to $10,000. Just because you get the notice, some businesses have moved from where they are to another location. So it's very important to check the maps on the location to see if you're eligible, if you're in an underserved community. And those who applied for the second tranche of people who will be contacted by SBA are those who applied and never received any money. And they will reach out to you by email. There have been stories about people applying for reconsideration and reopening their loans. None of that will exist in this. When you apply, you have to be correct the first time. There's not going to be, I have the wrong bank routing number, or I put in the wrong address or whatever. So be very careful when you do this work, check and double check and have somebody else check. Have a checker check your work. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the items that you need for this targeted EIDL advance: your 2019 tax return, your EIN or social security number, your gross receipts, confirm the information on the original EIDL application is still accurate. You may need to have a review if it's not. And applicants that pass the initial eligibility requirements will be required to sign a 4506 capital T, where the SBA and our sister agency, the IRS, will work together to confirm your information. Next slide, please. This is what I had just said, that there'll be only one application, that the information has to be accurate. And the SBA has set an internal goal to review these applications within 21 days. Again, the Congresswoman spoke about the SBDC, Small Business Development Center at Queens College. If you're unsure and you need help, there is free help provided with business advisors. Everyone is working online. I'm sure we'll give you a link later if you need to reach out, as well as, the housing co-ops. And there's several online resources where we provide free counseling services. Next slide, please. And just in case there's a shuttered venue operator on this call, these will be a grant. The most important thing that I just want to say is, besides it being not open and in big letters, it says you'll need SAM registration. if you applied for a PPP loan, just applying for it, it makes you ineligible for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. It's not, let me see if I get both, and then I'll see what I take. This program is very clear. If you apply for a first draw, a second draw PPP in this new round after December 27th, 2020, you're ineligible. So there's $15 billion, $2 billion is being reserved for small venues with less than 50 employees. There's a list here of, in general, live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts organizations and motion picture theater operators, relevant museums, zoos and aquariums, talent representatives, and up to 5 business entities owned by an eligible entity that also meet the requirements. I know all of those exist in your district, Congresswoman. So, plus in this state, you had to be in business on February 29th, 2020, different date than the PPP program. And again, you must not have applied for a PPP loan on or after December 27th, 2020. Next slide, please. This is a chart that's supposed to make life very easy for you. And Matt Coleman is one of the authors of it who's on with us today. But, it sort of shows you who may apply for what program. Basically, if you do apply for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, you may also apply for an EDIL. But again, like we said in the PPP, make sure that they're for different purposes. So next slide, please. Okay, so these are our programs that we've just reviewed for you. Next slide, please. And here are some places where you can reach us or find out information for yourself. SBA.gov is a 24/7 website. We all know how busy entrepreneurs are, and that we all work all hours of the day. So I think that's it. Is that Matt? Is that it? Questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Beth. All right, so I've gathered some questions that I got from professionals and board members in the co-op community, and hopefully you can shed some light on them. These are some of the more frequent questions that we've gotten. We were asked that, as you know, co-ops are made up of shareholders, and shareholders are considered owners. And there is a part in the application that requires the signatory to affirm under the penalties of perjury that no owner has been convicted of a crime, filed for bankruptcy, etc. Obviously, some co-ops have, hundreds, maybe thousands of shareholders, and obviously they can't attest to every single one. What is the expectation of the SBA when an application is being submitted with respect to this question?
So Jeff, that's a good question. I'm gonna have to get more on that for you, but normally the person who makes the certification would be the controlling person, would be the president or whoever it is that is in charge of the board from the co-op. But I'd have to double check to see what would happen if one of the shareholders of the co-ops had some sort of criminal record. I don't believe it would affect it, but I'd like to double check it before I tell you for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then another question I get frequently is the PPP certification in the application certification. They have to certify that the co-op is experiencing current economic uncertainty. With the second draw, there's a discernible numbers as to what constitutes eligibility. However, with the first draw, there is none. Many co-ops are are saying that their income has basically stayed the same, either through collections or increased maintenance, but their expenses have gone way up because of increased utilities, PPE charges, workers, quarantining, etc. Would that qualify in your mind as economic uncertainty under this application?
So that's another question you're gonna have to, that's another question you're gonna have with your lender and review with them. If you show some sort of financial difficulty, that's what pretty much what you're saying, that there's some sort of financial difficulty due to the COVID pandemic. And that's what would have to have created that financial difficulty. And there was a second part to your question too, Jeff, I remember.
No. I don't-
Certification, about who certifies to that?
Well, that was you answered that. That was
Okay.
that was the first part.
So
So
Jeff, I would assume even though your top line, your revenues would be equal, your bottom line is going to be significantly changed based on what you said on those expenses.
and that would fall under the economic uncertainty or
Well, John's going to check it, but it's not just the top line in this. It's the picture, right, that you're looking at.
okay.
Right, so you'd have to have had some sort of financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That's really what you're trying to show.
Mhm.
Okay, so another question I've gotten, many co-ops have, I'll call them sister co-ops, where they might be part of one big development and maybe it got broken down into separate corporations in Queens. We have that in a lot of the garden apartments. And very often the maintenance staff is shared by all the corporations, and the maintenance staff usually gets paid through one of them as like a pass-through, and then they get reimbursed from the other sister co-ops. So the question is, would that be one application for the pass-through co-op, or would each co-op make their own application and then submit their tax returns to show what they paid towards payroll?
So that would be one application. The payroll, whoever is the controlling payroll entity would be applying for PPP. But remember, each entity is still going to have to certify they're showing that they're having financial hardship. So if there's 4 co-ops that are part of that group, and there's 3 of them that are showing financial hardship, you would only include the ones that are showing financial hardship to you in the application.
All right. And one question I'm getting a lot is, will condominiums and homeowners association soon be eligible to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program?
Well, Congresswoman Meng's here. She last time she got the bill passed quickly. Maybe she can get this one passed also quickly.
Okay. So right. Would that be a legislative fix?
Yeah,
or
it
an
would be a
administrative?
legislative thing, correct.
All right. So, Congresswoman, we'll talk later about that. Okay. And
Sorry
here's
to put you on the spot, Congresswoman.
here's a question I just got asked, very important. If I made the application today, how long before we get the money?
So let me tell you what's going on with PPP. First of all, the co-ops are going to be submitting what's going to be called a first draw PPP, because you cannot apply for a second draw PPP until you've used all the funds of a first draw PPP. Right? So if they weren't eligible in the first round, this is the first time they're applying, so they'd be applying for a first draw PPP. Now, there was some fraud and there was some other things that were going on the first time with PPP. So what SBA did is, and through some suggestions through the IG, they put in some protections. So now when you make an application, it's not just an automatic approval. They're doing some background checks to make sure that the entity is a legitimate entity, and they're just trying to do some minimal checks to reduce the amount of fraud. So it may take a little bit longer than the first time when PPP was first introduced. It still shouldn't take that long. It depends on your lender, and it depends on how quickly you get them the information that they need.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. I just want to say, anybody that's listening out there, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat room, or you can go on to the President's Co-op and Condo Council website. It's pccny.org, and you can submit a question there, and we can follow up with the SBA representatives and get back to you later, or post the questions and answers right on the website. So to avoid just to make it more efficient. Congresswoman, we have no further questions. I think if you have any final comments or remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you to all our speakers, our guests who joined this evening's PPP workshop. Thank you again to the council for all your work. We had some good questions. Hope we were able to answer folks' inquiries. Like Jeff said, if we did not get to yours, or if you think of something later, feel free to reach out to our office too. My staff contact information is in the chat. Or obviously Jeff knows how to contact us as well. As John said, Congress is moving in the right direction, hopefully faster than slower, on President Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus legislation. So hopefully we will hear some good news and vote on it soon. But in the meantime, again, like I said in the beginning, we are so dependent on hearing the needs, what's working, what's not working, from all of you. So please do not hesitate to reach out. And of course, as always, thank you to the SBA for participating. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you.